Adrian arrived back exactly where he planned, the cold air hitting his face like a slap. But the scene was wrong. It wasn't the empty, fog-drenched bridge of his painful memory. It was Maya, and she wasn't Apos. T alone. A long, heavy brown coat shielded her from the damp evening. The coat belonged to Ethan Marlowe, who held her tightly, his posture radiating the stability Adrian had never offered. This was the consequence, the exact devastation he had tried so desperately to erase by jumping back in time. He had returned to the present, believing his small adjustment had fixed everything. He thought he had earned back his future with Maya. And quote, "It can and Apos. TB and quote." Adrian muttered, the bitter taste of metallic time travel still sharp in his throat. 3 days ago, in a world shattered by his indifference, Adrian had stared at the broken face of his watch, a physical symbol of his fatal delay that night. He had remembered the sheer desolation of the future without her, a future where she had completely moved on, hardened by his neglect. That pain gave him the power to choose. He chose the immense risk, plunging back to the crucial evening, determined to arrive at 8 p.m. precisely, the time he was supposed to meet her on the Hawthorne Bridge. But time, Adrian learned, was not linear forgiveness. Trying to save the past had only ensured that the painful future arrived sooner, and with a more devastating architect, Ethan. Adrian felt the familiar, searing regret, amplified tenfold. He had not just lost Maya once. He had lost her twice, the second loss fueled by the very attempt to fix the first. He clutched the lapel of his gray jacket, his knuckles white. He had promised himself he would never again see that look of resigned vulnerability on Maya's face. Yet, there she was, tucked securely into the embrace of the man who showed up when Adrian did not. Adrian had gone back in time, let her wait on the bridge, and returned to see another man embracing her. The ultimate, crushing irony was that he only sealed his doom faster. The light in Adrian Cole's apartment was perpetually the color of ash. Suited him. He existed in a sustained state of quiet erosion, wearing the same tired gray jacket most days, the scent of regret clinging to the fabric like stale smoke. His routine was less a life and more a holding pattern, a meticulous waiting game for the specific moment he had traveled through time to confront. He lived surrounded by the ghosts of what could have been. On his bedside table sat a framed photograph of Maya, taken 3 years prior, her hair long and wavy, a genuine smile that seemed impossible now. He did not look at the photo to find comfort. He looked at it to remind himself of the price of his failure. It was his anchor and his torture device. Adrian's obsession centered on a single, vital variable: time. He had returned to the week leading up to October 18th, the date of his original betrayal. On that night, he had chosen a trivial business meeting over the promised evening with Maya on the old steel bridge. He had called her later, offering excuses, but by then the emotional severance had begun. The bridge, meant to be a symbol of their future, became the monument to their ending. His focus narrowed to hours and minutes. He kept a physical calendar marked heavily in red ink. The only sound in his apartment was the soft, rhythmic click of a cheap digital clock, ticking away the borrowed seconds. Adrian frequently checked the broken watch on his wrist, a habit carried over from the future where time had run out entirely. It stopped hands pointing perpetually to 8:17 p.m., the exact moment he had realized, too late, what he had sacrificed. Every day was a simulation. He practiced the drive in his mind, mapping out potential traffic bottlenecks, calculating the necessary speed, mentally removing every potential distraction that had previously pulled him away. The original excuse, the unforeseen meeting, was the primary target of his temporal warfare. He had preemptively canceled the meeting hours before he even arrived in this timeline, ensuring that obstacle was eliminated. Yet, a deep unease persisted. He remembered the cold clarity of the future, the knowledge that even fixing the main error hadn't Apos been enough to save their relationship. He was haunted by the image of Ethan Marlowe, the stability he represented, the embrace that signaled Adrian and Apos' final, irreversible defeat. End quote. "I will not be late," end quote. He whispered to the empty room, his voice raw. End quote. Not this time. I will arrive at 7:55 p.m. 5 minutes early. I will see her face before the doubt sets in, end quote. Adrian's existence had become simple, almost ascetic. He ate little, slept less, fueled only by coffee and the singular, focused goal of preservation. He had alienated himself from all other human contact, seeing everyone else as potential variables that could introduce interference. He couldn't oppose. T risked the slightest deviation. The environment outside his window remained consistently blue-gray, reflecting the atmosphere of the timeline he now occupied. The city sounds, distant sirens, the dull roar of traffic, were muffled by his singular focus. He was waiting for the rain. The memory dictated that it had to be raining. He spent the entirety of October 17th reviewing his financial records, his correspondences, every communication from his past self that might have contributed to the distraction. He found nothing new. The failure had been simple neglect disguised as ambition. Now, his ambition was solely focused on her. When the digital clock flipped to 12 a.m. on October 18th, the atmosphere in the apartment shifted from stale nostalgia to serious, bone-deep urgency. This was it. The day of consequence. The moment he had spent months trying to earn back. Adrian stood, pacing the small living room. The calm demeanor he maintained during the preparation evaporated. A nervous energy pulsed beneath his skin. He was going back into the fire, armed only with foreknowledge and a desperate hope that fate could be negotiated with. He walked to the window. It was still dry outside, but the air felt heavy, metallic. He needed the specific, melancholic environment of the initial failure. The slick streets, the yellow glow of the street lamps reflecting off the wet pavement. He dressed meticulously, pulling on the familiar gray jacket. He checked his pockets. Wallet, keys, and a small, worn box containing the small silver necklace he was meant to give Maya that night. He had kept it, a relic of the future he had fled. 7 a.m. He ate a cold slice of toast, forcing the calories down. He had 8 hours until he needed to be on the road, and an hour and a half until the designated meeting time. This timeline afforded him ample opportunity, an almost luxurious margin of error. But Adrian remembered the crushing weight of the almost oppos. He grabbed his keys and paused at the door. He wasn't oppos. Leaving for a meeting, he was leaving for a redemption. The simplicity of the goal was terrifying. If he succeeded, his future was restored. If he failed, he would learn what new, agonizing twist the temporal loop had devised for him. He stepped out into the damp morning air, the cool temperature a sharp contrast to the furnace of anxiety within him. The sky was darkening quickly, clouds rolling in from the west. The rain was coming. Adrian got into his car, but he didn't oppose. Start the engine immediately. He looked down at the broken watch on his wrist, then at the functional digital clock on his dashboard. The weight of his second chance was not merely the burden of correction, but the profound responsibility of knowing the entire future hinged on the next few hours. The calm isolation of the waiting period was over. The game had begun, and the stakes were higher than he had ever imagined, because this time, he knew exactly who was waiting to take his place. He was not just fighting against his past self. He was fighting against Ethan Marlowe, the man who offered stability, the man who showed up. He put the car in drive. The mission was now operational. Adrian had established his presence and confronted his timeline. The unease was now a grinding urgency. He had to be perfect. He couldn't oppose. Afford a single small error. The road ahead was clear, but the path to Maya was fraught with the invisible dangers of consequence. He pressed the accelerator, merging into the traffic flow, heading toward the bridge. Adrian drove through the familiar, damp streets of the city. His hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel, the leather cold and worn beneath his grip. Every traffic light felt like a personal betrayal, every slow pedestrian an antagonist. This was the moment, the exact path he had taken years ago, the path that led him to that moment of cruel indifference and the resulting lifetime of regret. He glanced at the dashboard clock. 8:31 p.m. 16 minutes until the scheduled meeting, 16 minutes until the moment Maya would first look at the empty spot where he should have been. He felt the heavy, useless weight of the broken wristwatch in his pocket. The one he had tried to retrieve earlier, the action that had cost him perhaps 90 seconds. 90 seconds that had snowballed into disaster in the original timeline. He wouldn't allow it this time. He was armed with memory. He was armed with the terrible knowledge of the future. The traffic ahead bottlenecked suddenly near the old commercial district. A construction crew, surprisingly active late on a Tuesday evening, had blocked the two main lanes. Adrian slammed on the brakes, feeling the familiar spike of panic. A panic far worse than the mild inconvenience it had been the first time. The first time, he had simply sighed and waited, letting the seconds drain away carelessly. This time, he couldn't wait. He saw an alleyway entrance, narrow and dark, a route he had avoided years ago because it was rumored to be a rough path, unpaved and treacherous. This is it, he thought. The difference. He jerked the wheel, the tires hitting the uneven gravel surface of the alley with a jarring thud. The car bounced violently. The darkness was absolute, relieved only by the faint light spilling from the grimy windows of forgotten warehouses. He pressed the accelerator, pushing the limits of the small sedan. He calculated furiously. This alley should shave 5 minutes off the trip. 5 precious minutes of buffer time. But the alleyway was longer than he remembered. The turns tighter, the ground worse. The car shuddered. Then, with a sickening crunch, the front left tire hit a deep, unseen pothole filled with rainwater. The steering column resisted him immediately. He knew the sound. A blown tire. Adrian cursed. A strangled, animal sound that echoed off the brick walls. He ripped his seatbelt off and scrambled out into the cold, damp air. 8:39 p.m. He stared at the flat tire, deflated and ruined. Panic metastasized into absolute, paralyzing dread. He had engineered a worse failure. His attempt to gain time had cost him everything. There was no changing the tire. Not here, not now. It would take 20 minutes he did not have. He looked back toward the street. It was faster to run. Adrian started running, sprinting out of the dark alley and onto the paved sidewalk, the chill biting into his lungs. The weight of his jacket felt unbearable. He ran toward the river, toward the bridge, the scene of the crime he was so desperate to prevent. The air grew heavier, thick with the scent of water and diesel. He could see the iconic glow ahead, the amber light of the street lamps reflecting off the wet metal structure of the old district bridge. 8:48 p.m. He was officially 1 minute late for the critical moment. In the original timeline, Maya would have just settled into the cold realization that he was Nanapos. Coming. He pushed his body harder, ignoring the fiery pain in his side. He reached the base of the bridge ramp, struggling for breath, his vision momentarily blurred by the exertion. He stumbled forward, his focus locked on the center span where she always stood. And then he stopped. The world narrowed to a single, devastating tableau framed by the yellow lamplight. Maya was there. She was standing exactly where she was supposed to be, draped in her familiar blue scarf, her shoulders hunched slightly against the drizzle. She was Nanapos. Looking at her phone, wasn't pacing in frantic frustration. She was still. And she was Nanapos. Alone. A figure stood close beside her. Taller, with a stabilizing posture and the long, familiar lines of a dark coat. Ethan Marlowe. Ethan had his arm wrapped around Maya's shoulders. Not a casual touch, but a slow, careful gesture of comfort and security. Her head was tilted slightly, resting against the solid expanse of his shoulder. Adrian felt the bottom fall out of his reality. This wasn't an Apos. Just failure. This was a complete, agonizing inversion of his expectations. When he had arrived late in the original timeline, Maya had been alone, devastated, but reachable. She had been waiting for him, fueled by a dying hope. Now she was being consoled. She was being held. The sudden, crushing realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. Because he had blown the tire, because he had been forced to abandon his car and run, he hadn't arrived merely minutes late. He had arrived later than his previous self had. The 90 seconds he had tried to save had evolved into 10 extra minutes of agonizing absence. 10 minutes during which Ethan, likely following a similar schedule as Adrian's former self, had seen her waiting, vulnerable, and had seized the opportunity to step in. Adrian had not fixed the mistake. He had ensured its permanence and amplified its consequence. He had cleared the stage perfectly for the antagonist. He retreated slightly behind a massive stone pillar, the damp stone cold against his cheek. He watched the scene with terrifying clarity. Ethan spoke softly, his voice too distant to hear, but his cadence was soothing. Maya lifted her face, and even from this distance, Adrian could see the fragile blend of vulnerability and relief in her expression. Relief that anyone had cared enough to show up. He watched Ethan pull her closer, tucking her head under his chin. It was an intimate gesture, the kind of protective embrace that Adrian, consumed by work and distraction, had rarely offered when it mattered most. The raw jealousy tasted like acid, but it was quickly overwhelmed by the staggering guilt. He was jealous of the comfort that he, and he alone, had made space for. Adrian wanted to run out, to shout, to explain the time loops and the regrets and the desperate, failed mission. He wanted to scream that he had loved her, that he had traveled across the expanse of his own misery just to fix this single night. But he didn't, and Appos, T-move. He stood frozen, realizing the terrible truth of the time loop. It was not a magical reset button. It was a mirror. Every frantic attempt to manipulate external events without first changing the careless, self-absorbed man within him led only to greater destruction. He was still the man who, when faced with an obstacle, chose the fastest, most desperate route, leading to a breakdown. He was still the man who failed to show up. If he burst out now, shouting denials and demanding her attention, he would only confirm to Maya that he was unstable, erratic, and selfish. All the things she was currently learning Ethan was not. Ethan finished speaking and gently lifted Maya and Appos' chin. He wiped a stray tear from her cheek with his thumb. It was a gesture of ownership, of care, of quiet dedication. Adrian slid down the pillar, his legs unable to support him anymore. He sat on the cold, wet pavement, the sound of the river rushing beneath the bridge now a loud, indifferent roar. He had gone back in time, had been given the chance to mend the tapestry, and instead he had ripped it entirely in half. He looked down at his empty hand, the sensation of the broken watch still phantom-like on his wrist. He hadn't, and Appos. T just lost time. He had lost the future he was trying to reclaim, and the cost was exponentially higher this time. The only difference between this moment and the original memory was that, in this version, Maya was already moving on. The cold air bit into Adrian's lungs, sharp and unforgiving. He ran, the wet asphalt slick under his worn shoes, the sound of his frantic footsteps muffled by the gathering fog. He had made it back to the exact hour, the exact minute. He was there, but the certainty that had fueled his frantic dash evaporated as he rounded the final bend onto the bridge. The yellow streetlights cut through the gloom, illuminating two figures standing close together near the railing. It wasn't an Appos' reunion. It was an intrusion. Adrian skidded to a stop 20 feet away. The world narrowed down to a single, devastating image. Maya, her head resting against a broad shoulder, her body accepting the embrace. It was Ethan. The sight didn't, and Appos. T just hurt. It was a physical blow, stripping the air from his chest. This was the future he had fled, the reality he had sworn to obliterate by controlling the past. Yet, here it stood, solid and undeniable, born from the very action he took to prevent it. He had created his own doom. Ethan looked up first, sensing the sudden, aggressive stillness in the air. He didn't, and Appos. T flinch. His expression was one of calm authority, the protective stance of a man who belonged. Maya, Adrian managed, his voice ragged and foreign. Maya slowly lifted her head. Her eyes, red-rimmed and exhausted, met his. There was no joy, no relief, only a deep, profound sadness that reflected his failure back at him. It was the gaze of someone who had completely given up waiting. Adrian took a step forward, driven by sheer desperate denial. I'm here. I made it. I told you I would be here. Ethan shifted slightly, subtly blocking Adrian's path to Maya. She waited an hour, Adrian. I didn't oppose. See you anywhere. You don't understand, Adrian snapped, pointing a trembling finger at Ethan. Stay out of this, Marlowe. This is between us. This is my time, my life, my mistake to fix. Ethan's calm reply was the dagger. There is no your time anymore. There is only right now. And right now, she's hurting because you weren't here. Again. The word and quote, again and quote, echoed the loop, the constant failure that defined him. Adrian looked past Ethan to Maya, trying to appeal to the history they shared, the future he knew they were meant to have. Maya, please, you know how much I love you. This was just a mistake, a terrible delay. We can still fix it. Everything can go back to how it was before I left. Maya stepped away from Ethan, but she didn't step toward Adrian. She stood alone in the faint light, a symbol of her rediscovered independence, hardened by his failures. That's the core of it, Adrian, she said, her voice quiet but firm, carrying the weight of finality. You keep trying to go back to how things were. You keep thinking that if you just rewind the clock, the problems disappear. But the clock ISN and oppose. The problem. You are. She paused, taking a slow, painful breath. I didn't just wait for you on this bridge tonight. I've been waiting for the real you for years. The one who commits, the one who shows up, the one who doesn't oppose. Leave me stranded emotionally. When you didn't arrive this time, it wasn't oppose. A sudden shock. It was just confirmation. Her words hit him with the force of truth, greater than any time travel paradox. He hadn't oppose. Just changed a consequence. He had forced her hand into choosing stability over his chaos. I tried so hard to fix it, Adrian pleaded, the realization of his ultimate loss starting to sink in. I saw what was coming, the end of us, and I came back to stop it. Don't you see? I love you enough to fight time itself. Maya shook her head slowly. You fought time, Adrian. You didn't oppose. Fight your own mistakes. And now, by trying to change that one night, you only made sure I knew exactly what I needed to do next. She turned slightly, a silent acknowledgement to Ethan. Ethan placed a gentle hand on her back, guiding her. It was a simple gesture, yet it screamed ownership, comfort, and permanence. Everything Adrian lacked. Goodbye, Adrian, she whispered, not looking back. They walked away from him, disappearing into the cold, dense fog covering the bridge. The yellow light of the street lamps seemed to dim, leaving Adrian engulfed in blue-gray shadows. He stood perfectly still, his body trembling not from the cold, but from the systemic failure of his entire being. The time loop had closed, not by saving their future, but by ensuring its absolute destruction. He was left alone on the bridge, the very spot he had obsessed over fixing, now a monument to his failure. The tragic irony was complete. By trying to erase the past's consequence, he had solidified the present loss. He reached up and touched the broken clock on his wrist. The ticking had stopped long ago, but he finally understood the true lesson. Time could be manipulated, but consequences, unless the underlying character changed, were relentless. He hadn't oppose. Lost her to a few minutes of delay. He had lost her to years of being the wrong man. The ache in his chest was vast and endless. The bittersweet truth settled over him. He had gained clarity, but he had lost everything that mattered. This was the end of the road. Se que esta historia é intensa. E por isso que eu compartilho esses momentos. Se você valoriza a verdade e gosta de histórias que te fazem pensar e sentir, faça o seguinte. Considera esse inscrever no canal e comente de qual cidade você está assistindo. O melhor jeito de garantir que você não perca a próxima lição de vida. Adrian stood motionless, frozen by the sight he had sought both to avoid and to erase. The cold air felt thin, unable to carry away the sharp, visceral understanding that slammed into him. Ethan was there. Ethan was stability. Ethan was the replacement he had accidentally forged with his own negligence. Maya's head rested on Ethan's shoulder, a movement so natural, so filled with relief and safety, that it extinguished the desperate hope Adrian had clung to for years. This wasn't an Apos, just comfort. This was connection. This was a bond formed in the void Adrian had created. He had traveled through time, overcome impossible physics, and yet he was still too late. The small delay he introduced, the very attempt to fix the past, had simply ensured that Ethan arrived precisely when Maya needed him most. The universe, Adrian realized, was not giving him a second chance. It was forcing him to witness the consequence of his original failure, amplified. He watched them separate slightly. Ethan pulled back, wiping a stray tear from Maya's cheek with a tenderness that made Adrian's chest constrict. They exchanged a few quiet words Adrian couldn't and Apos hear, but whose meaning was painfully clear. Trust, reassurance, future. Adrian's hand instinctively went to his wrist, feeling the heavy, cold metal of the broken watch. Felt like a useless anchor now. He hadn't and Apos been fixing time. He had merely been rearranging deck chairs on a sinking ship. His flaw wasn't and Apos being late once. His flaw was fundamentally believing that Maya would always wait. He had undervalued her, not just that night on the bridge, but throughout their entire history. He turned his back slowly. The air of the bridge, previously heavy with the promise of potential redemption, now settled into a crushing finality. There would be no confrontation, no dramatic entry, no last-ditch plea. That would only be another selfish act, dragging Maya back into the confusion he represented. The most loving, most responsible thing he could do now was to disappear, to allow the consequence he created to become her peace. He walked away from the flickering yellow light of the bridge, the sound of his heavy steps echoing unnaturally loud in the silence. He didn't an Apos. Looked back. The blue-gray atmosphere swallowed him whole. This was the end of the loop, not the glorious rewind he had envisioned, but a bitter, irreversible checkmate. Years passed, or perhaps moments. Time became meaningless again without Maya to anchor it. Adrian learned to live not with the fantasy of fixing the day, but with the painful, undeniable truth of his character. He stopped trying to manipulate time or circumstance. He started owning the original sin, not showing up. He never sought out news of Maya and Ethan, though he carried the image of their embrace like a scar. He understood that the greatest tragedy was not that time travel had failed him, but that he had failed himself in every timeline. This story ISN and Apos about time travel. It is about the brutal geometry of regret. We often think that if we could just undo that single crucial mistake, the harsh word, the missed meeting, the moment we prioritize something trivial over someone essential, we could save everything. Adrian learned the devastating truth. The mistake is rarely the single action. The mistake is the person we were when we committed it. The second chance Adrian received was not a chance to reclaim Maya, but a terrifying, brilliant opportunity for self-confrontation. The time loop didn't and Apos exist to alter the external world. It existed to alter the internal one. Adrian was forced to realize that the delay on the original night was merely the symptom of a deeper, ongoing carelessness. When he went back, he focused on correcting the clock, but not on correcting his fundamental belief that she was an inexhaustible resource. He tried to fix the event without changing the man. And the universe responded by showing him that when you are careless with someone's devotion, someone else will eventually treasure it. The lesson delivered by this tragedy is stark and simple. You cannot outrun the consequence of who you are. Attempting to manipulate fate to reverse a single moment of negligence will only accelerate the inevitable consequence, because the root of the problem lies within you. To truly fix the past, you have to become a version of yourself that would never have allowed the mistake to happen in the first place. Adrian never achieved that internal transformation. He just sped up the clock, only to watch his own replacement inherit the life he forfeited. He lost Maya twice. Once through indifference, and the second time through a desperate, miscalculated attempt to win her back by fixing an external circumstance rather than fixing the internal deficit of his character. He finally understood the cost of underestimating the person who loved him most, and that, in the brutal clarity of self-awareness, was his bittersweet ending. He gained the wisdom that might save his future, but at the irreversible cost of his past love. The truth, etched in the empty space where Maya used to wait, was that sometimes the only thing left to do is accept the loss you earned. Now, I want to know from you. Comment here below. What would have been your choice in my place? Would you have made that sacrifice? And if you like surprising endings, I left another video right here beside me. It is a shocking story. Click there. I and Appos. LL see you in the next video.